Welcome to EIT Climate-KIC's podcast called How Could We? The climate crisis is a complex global issue, threatening the way we live and causing extreme uncertainty about the future. With its impacts being felt more often and more severely around the world, we are left wondering, how could we have let this happen? Well, a growing number of people and organisations have recognised that working through gradual incremental change is not enough. Join us for a series of conversations about building hope, curiosity and excitement for a more equal and desirable future. We'll hear from some remarkable people who are putting truly transformative and innovative solutions into practice. We'll be asking them, how could we achieve a climate resilient, inclusive and beautiful world for everyone?
Welcome, I am Anne-Sophie Garrigou, a journalist, feminist and environmentalist with a passion for women's rights and climate justice. I work for EIT Climate-KIC, Europe's leading climate innovation initiative. We're helping local municipalities, national governments, regions and other stakeholders to deliver near impossible climate goals. We also support local partners all around the world to strengthen the climate tech ecosystem they work with. So why has EIT Climate-KIC launched the podcast? Well, as the climate crisis continues, increasing amounts of people are being affected by it and feeling helpless, and no wonder. Temperature records continue to be broken every year. In Spain and Portugal alone, more than 2,000 people died in the 2022 heat waves. Extreme wildfires are also growing worldwide. Last year, almost 33,000 Canadians in British Columbia were displaced by wildfire. Then flooding. In Pakistan, 1,678 people died this year due to the floods caused by heavier than usual monsoon rains and melting glaciers. This is the climate crisis. It's a climate crisis already happening and affecting people worldwide, including those in countries who are the least responsible for the breakdown. So, how can we build a climate resilient future? At EIT Climate-KIC, we're mobilizing different networks and resources to deliver rapid change on the ground in a positive way. We want to show you that change is possible. We'd also like to hear from you, so get in touch about your worries and what you're doing in your community to enact change. Our first series will focus on land use, sustainable forestry, and the dilemma of using trees for timber. Over the next 3 episodes, we'll be talking to a land use expert plus representatives from 2 innovative forestry projects in Africa and Europe. The main question we are trying to answer is it possible to create a truly sustainable forest economy? Forests are an essential ally in the fight against climate change and biodiversity loss. They function as carbon sinks and help reduce the impact of climate change. Through the European Union Landmark Green Deal, a package of policy initiatives with the goal of reaching climate neutrality by 2050, forests are key. With the current climate and cost of living crisis, it is more important than ever to take care of our public lands and use the tools available to help adapt them to changing conditions. But there is an inherent issue. By using trees to create forest products, aren't we contributing further to the climate breakdown? This is what we'll be discussing with Daniel Zimmer. Daniel works on the Climate Smart Economy Forest Program, a collaborative initiative from EIT Climate-KIC, the World Economic Forum and the World Resource Institute. The program looks at how to use wood and other forest products to substitute fossil fuel-based products, while at the same time preserve forest carbon sink function, protect biodiversity, and support the creation of jobs.
We feel that what is very important is to demonstrate things. Just doing science and theory is important, but it needs to be concretely implemented on real cases on the ground. And this is what we have been doing in the past 2 years with a quite large group of at least 30 to 40 partners in 15 what we call breakthrough initiatives across the planet.
Hello Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today on the first episode of our new podcast. I'm delighted to have you here and really looking forward to talking about such a sensitive and important topic. So, a very big question to open the episode. Isn't it conflicting to protect forests to preserve biodiversity and at the same time to use forests more to produce timber buildings and all things with wood, which could lead to maybe more deforestation? So can you explain me a little bit about this dilemma and how we deal with it?
So it is a big question, and it has raised and is raising at the moment a lot of questions in Europe and in other parts of the world. Yes, of course, it's easy to imagine that if you cut trees in the forest, you may basically reduce the ability of the forest to produce more wood. And so how can you have at the same time big forests and a lot of wood? Is a tension that needs to be solved, and it can be conflicting if we do not ensure that the forests are managed in a sustainable way. You should not harvest more than the annual growth of the forest. First of all, this is a sort of minimum. If you start harvesting more, then you are deforesting, you are losing your forests. The problem is that when you harvest, you lose also quite some carbon due to the harvesting techniques. You need to enter the forest to destroy, or at least part of the soil on the surface. So there is a very important thing to do, which is to find ways to ensure that the forests are managed sustainably and that their capacity to absorb carbon from the atmosphere, what we call the sink function, is not reduced by the harvesting technologies. So fortunately, there are solutions, and more we see that foresters introduce forests with more biodiversity. So they diversify the tree species. And in fact, they also use continuous cover approaches. So you do not clear cut the forest, you just select the trees that you will be harvesting. And with these methods, you can manage your forest much more sustainably. The problem is that it has a cost. To cover these additional costs, you need to be sure that the value of the wood is sufficient to pay for an additional cost. This is what we are trying to do at the moment, to investigate on concrete cases in programs that are using wood and that are demonstrating also innovative solutions, that it is possible to do this, but it is quite challenging, I have to say. But we are starting, and a lot of learnings have already been gained.
So one of those programs is the Climate Smart Forest Economy Program, and you're talking about the challenges. And one of the problems with sustainable forestry is that stakeholders have different approaches, right? For instance, conservation organizations will have different priorities than companies in the wood value chain. So how does those programs deal with this issue and bring organizations with different values together?
So we have at least two ways to deal with this. The first way is dialogue. So we are working with the World Resources Institute and the Yale University in the US, who have a long tradition of organizing stakeholder dialogues. This is what we have been doing in the program, and organized a number of dialogues in different parts of the world to see also what are the positions and how we can align, and what are also the critical questions raised by the conservation organizations, and also see, on the other hand, those who are using wood, how they also see the way they can create value and ensure that that value is used to maintain the biodiversity and the sink capacity of the forest. So this is the dialogue is really very important and needs to be continued. And we need to deepen also this dialogue by using more science. At the moment, we still not completely confident that we have the right data, that we can understand how the sink function of the forest is evolving, and that we can also create enough value by using new technologies that still need to be invented for some of them. What is very important to understand also is that currently forests are threatened in many places of the world because of climate change. Changes in the temperature make trees not necessarily adapted anymore to the place where they started to grow. trees do not move like human beings or animals, so they need to be adapted to the climate where they are growing. And so this is less and less the case. And so we see that if trees that are already not fully adapted to their local climates are suddenly affected with pests and are threatened also by wildfires, the sink function of the forest may be also reduced. So there is a sort of win-win approach that can be developed, which is to ensure that the future capacity of the forest will be protected, will be maintained by selecting the right trees to be planted. And sometimes nature, also natural regeneration, can help also to have a proper selection approach to the trees that need to grow in a certain place.
I think this is really, really interesting, this adaptation side, and I'm glad you mentioned it. So we're going to get to the next questions. We hear more and more about using more sustainable materials in construction, including wood, especially in Europe, where there are so many interesting legislative conversation happening now around the EU Green Deal and the forest strategy. So timber is an ace building material, and the carbon benefits of using it are important, as we know. But how can we make sure that we're using it in the most sustainable way?
Once the wood has been harvested, it needs to be utilized in the best possible way. Wood, as you mentioned, stores carbon. So in 1 cubic meter of wood, you have at least 500 kilograms of carbon. So that's, of course, one of the main arguments to increase the utilization of wood in buildings or in furniture or products that have a long lifespan. And it is very important. Once we have harvested wood, the carbon that is stored in that wood needs to remain in value chains as long as possible. And also, another very important thing is that if you harvest the wood and only a fraction of that wood ends up in long-term product, it means that you are losing a lot of that wood because it is burned or wasted too quickly. And at the moment, an order of magnitude of the wood that is used in long-term products is that it's 20 to 30% of the carbon that is harvested that remains in these long-term products. We need to improve this. It means that there are different things that we have discovered that can be done for this. Of course, the building sector is very important because a building is a long-lasting product. And so if you store carbon in the form of wood in a building, it will be stored in a long period of time. And so this is an obvious area where we need to work. At the same time, we need to remember also that if you use wood instead of cement or steel, you are also replacing fossil carbon-rich products. So what can be done to increase the proportion of the harvested carbon to be used in these long-term products? There are different possibilities. Insulation products. At the moment, with all the wasted wood, you could produce insulation panels that would also replace more traditional ones, again based on fossil carbon. And so these insulation panels could be used, for instance, to refurbish or insulate older buildings. So you would not only use wood in new buildings, but also in existing buildings. And again, this for a long period of time. Second is circular economy. If you start recycling the carbon, then of course it will also remain for a longer period of time in the products. So it can be for then paper products, for instance, can replace again plastic, and with circular economy approaches can be beneficial. The entire system that needs to be thought through carefully, and we call this in our program the sink storage substitution holistic approach. So we need to think at the same time to maintain and protect the sink function of the forest, ensure that a maximum of the carbon that is harvested is stored in long-term products, and ensure also that the products that we use are substituting products that would be otherwise produced with fossil carbon.
And so, what is the role of legislators in all of this? Like, how can they help you and other programs, other organizations to reach those goals?
I see two areas. The first is the Green Deals. We see now that not only we have a Green Deal in Europe, but we have cities, for instance, are adopting their own Green Deal. So these Green Deals, they are always very important because they give the directions. What are the different ways we want to go to net zero? Because at the end, it's moving toward net zero and ensuring we have portfolios of measures that conjunctively will help cities or countries to achieve their net zero targets. Very often, so this is the first part, ensure the momentum is built and there are clear directions given to the society and to the economy. So, for instance, we are working in Scotland with the city region of Glasgow, and there one of the ideas is that to help the city region achieve their Green Deal objectives, they want to ensure that the public sector will demonstrate that they are able to utilize all the principles that I mentioned before. So what are a number of policy measures and directions that we want to take? Can we demonstrate ourselves as a public entity that we want to go there? So this will have quite an effect also in bringing the rest of the economy also in the right direction. And then legislators have a lot of regulations to prepare and implement, because using wood, for instance, at the moment, or also managing the forests, there are a lot of regulations. For instance, the land regulation in Scotland is not necessarily appropriate because has been too much in favor of large landowners. Now there is a big need also to give the local smallholders of land to manage their land in a better way. But there are also regulations in the building sector. Can we build and with what type of material can we build? So is it possible to build more with wood? And if so, what should be the quality of the wood that is being utilized? So regulation has really an important role to play in order to create also a level playing field, but also create the incentives that will bring the actors in the right direction.
Thank you. And I really want to talk about the impact that all of this has on people, because of course when we talk about protecting the forest to protect biodiversity, in the end it's also about the people living on the planet. So can you explain a little bit about what the impact does, for instance, tree mortality have on people and their surrounding landscape? And is there a way to use sustainable forestry for the greater good, for instance, for boosting biodiversity, to support local communities?
Yes, this should be one of the purposes of forest management. Forests are, for many people, quite emotional. They are part of the landscape. They need to be protected as much as possible because they provide quite a large number of services to the societies. We speak about biodiversity, but we need to remember also that forests are essential for water quality. They are also very important for erosion protection. And so they provide also other economic goods than just the trees. I don't remember, but I think there are millions of people in the world who live from the products of the forest, mushrooms or other edible products. So all this is part of the amenities of the forests that are essential for many societies. I often also used to say that we all have a sort of dilemma in ourselves, which is the dilemma between the citizen and the customer. So the citizen, I want to see the forests, I want to benefit from all these services provided by the forest. As a customer, I'm interested more in the wood because I see the wood as a renewable material. And in fact, this dilemma that we observe, we talked about before, which was the forest and the wood, is a dilemma that is in ourselves in many cases. We need to try our best to manage this. Why? Because with climate change, so we know that we need first to reduce our emissions. Then we need to enhance the sink function of our terrestrial ecosystems. And third, we will need to have the materials in place. Once we don't have any fossil carbon, where will the material we are using come from? A lot of this material will need to be provided by nature and by natural value chains.
Thank you to Daniel for an illuminating interview and for kicking off this podcast series. Daniel Zimmer will be at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh to talk about the importance of forest. If you're interested to know about what Climate-KIC is going to be up to at COP, you can visit our website climate-kic.org/systems-change-now. That's climate, climate-kic.org/systems-change-now. We will be back with more episodes soon. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you, so get in touch at media@climate-kic.org. This episode was produced by Barbara Mendes-George. See you next time!